Shopify presents cool sheets from aha to...
I suffered from the wrong kind of hot in bed, heat-induced insomnia. That was my aha moment. Bed sheets that keep you cool. Then I thought, how do I even sell bed sheets? That's when I had the idea that made it all possible, signing up on Shopify.
This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/offer22. Shopify.com/offer22.
This episode is brought to you by Minute Clinic at CVS. Whether you wake up feeling sick on a Sunday or your little one has a sore throat at the airport, you and your family can get quality virtual care from a board-certified Minute Clinic provider 7 days a week. Go to minuteclinic.com/virtual care to learn more. Services and appointment availability may vary.
So today is going to be a bonus podcast. When I was in college, I had a friend named Marissa Klien, who is now married, no longer Marissa Klien, but she's still as cool as she was in college. She was one of those people you were really like kind of taken with in college. Incredible fashion from outside of New York City. Just a cool woman, or a cool young woman at the time. So her and her sister Jamie have a podcast called the Dreamcatchers podcast. And contrary to my belief, because I could think that the universe revolves around me, she actually did not know that I was sober. She didn't know anything about, me bottoming out and all that ugly stuff. And when we started this podcast, it kind of came on her radar. And her sister asked me to be on their podcast and share my journey with them as it relates to personal and professional. And it was really cool. This podcast is really cool. And I think you'll get something out of it as far as from a recovery standpoint for sure. And then even other stuff is just, my development through all this. It's all about, they use the Payoff, obviously the name of this podcast, as the theme for the podcast I did with them. And when people ask me, hey, well, tell me about this in your life, I always go back to sobriety, because everything for me, positive, starts with getting sober. And I think if you take time to listen to this, if you want to, you'll find out that that's a recurring theme. So check it out. Dreamcatchers podcast with me. I'm sharing it on our feed because they're awesome and it's a cool pod. And but first, I'm headed out to California to see this dude in a couple days, Kevin Sztoser.
Stand by the ocean floor.
Welcome to the Dreamcatchers, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are here today with a very special guest and old friend, and of mostly Marissa's, but I remember his name very vividly, although I was way younger when we met. Way. Like tween. Like a couple years older than Sienna, Marissa's daughter, which is wild. So thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Pete.
that's true.
We're going to have you introduce yourself to our audience in just a moment. Thank you to our audience for being here today. I know it's a gorgeous day here on the East Coast. So if you're listening from an AirPod or you're taking a walk, which I thankfully was able to do earlier today, but I'm obviously indoors now. I was going to take this outside and then I was afraid that my connection would be too funky. So wanted to welcome everyone. We are here for a What's the Word episode today. We're going to talk about the word payoff for a couple of reasons. And we're going to have our guest Pete introduce himself in just a minute, but Marissa wanted to make sure you had a chance to say hello to the audience, talk about a little bit why you decided to have Pete on today. We're so excited to have him here for many, many reasons. So go ahead, Marissa.
So hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's a beautiful day. I'm feeling all of the feels. I think I'm not alone in saying that the New York area is fighting back and wants to feel very alive with this dose of sunshine. I am excited and honored and privileged to have a friend on today's show. I have known Pete for 20 plus years. He and I went to college together in another beloved web. We are both proud graduates of the University of Richmond, and we are known as the Spiders. That was our mascot. And there's a lot of play on words as Richmond students to be part of a web. So it's not ironic or lost on me that web has been a very big, or that word has been a very big part of my professional journey, and part of our Dreamcatcher's culture, because the truth is who you collect and who you capture and who you touch in your life ends up being part of your personal and professional web and or journey. So I actually saw that Peter, and I don't want to say too much, but I saw he was working on something incredibly remarkable. And I have to say, I'm really proud, and this is to any of my spiders that are listening, a lot of our friends did really amazing things with their lives, like a lot. And I said, I'm like, I'm going to start turning this magnifying glass on people I used to know from other chapters of life, because it's really, really fun to unpack stories, especially from a vantage point from this side, because there's several that I remember of Pete from the other side that, he and I have discussed several times in the last couple of weeks, and we're not going to share them today, especially the ones that he knows about me. So, because all our stories are pre-social media, and luckily they're safe there. Yeah. Anyway, so I reconnected with him after seeing something he was doing, and I was really proud. And he, in typical spider way, I reached out and he responded, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, because that was the kind of bond that we all had at that school. And anyway, Pete, introduce yourself.
Well, when the super cool, popular, pretty girl sends you a message, it's just like college. You respond right away, or maybe you try not to. I still have that gene.
You still have the flattery too.
Yeah, Jamie and Marissa, thank you so much for just for having me today, for giving me this opportunity. It really was great, Marissa, to hear from you when this thing called the Payoff, the word today that we're talking about. For me, it is about, one of the things that I think brought me back on your radar was the podcast I'm doing, and it's called The Payoff with Pete. And that pretty much is why I'm here today. It's sort of a crossover between, I like what Jamie said before, like your personal and professional. You do a little personal and you do a little professional. For me, the personal is professional, really, because my personal life was kind of out of whack, big time. So, my story is, and the thing about the Payoff is, I got sober about 9.5 years ago, and I've been on a journey ever since. And it's been pretty awesome. And it's been hard, like anybody else's life, but I have gotten to a point where I'm actually like pretty comfortable in my own skin. I'm actually pretty confident. I have some things going. I still have the same type of insecurities and fears I had when I was younger, when I first met you, but I used to calm a lot of those fears with like drinking and other stuff. And the payoff is getting to the other side and not needing any of that stuff to live like a real full life, because I'm an alcoholic. That's why I got sober. And when you have that alcoholic mentality, a lot of times you think, I need something to be something better, or to enjoy this. And to get sober and to work a program, I've learned that that's not true. So I mean, that's the crux of this whole thing. And I'm just, I'm stoked to be here.
Well, to that point, the Dreamcatchers is about career, right? It is about the journey that people are on professionally, how they touch others, how they inspire others, how they make impact in their life. That's what we do. That's what we shine light on. That's what we're all about. We've also spent a lot of times, Jamie and I, professionally over the course of the better half of the last 2 decades, talking about how career is actually very much intertwined with mental wellness. And what you would or would not have known is the first episode that we kicked off this year was for 2021 was about mental wellness and suicide prevention with a guest who was phenomenal, our friend Susan. And, I just truly believe that we are living in a time where it's enough is enough. And it is important for other people to be able to relate to senior executives that are magnetic and charismatic and important and making strides, and also have healed pieces of their brokenness and some pieces are still broken, and that's okay. And I think that when you and I were graduating, and yes, Jamie has said that we're a couple years older than her, but in truth, the generation between, which it was a tiny bit, but between Jamie and you and I, there was a little bit more ability to be your authentic self. You and I were at that tail end where being your authentic self in a professional capacity was not always okay. And I would guess that played into some of your qualms and the illness that you battled. But what I love about your story is, I mean, it's trifold. You succeeded anyway, which is testament. I mean, you were succeeding and holding an incredible career, even while battling your addiction. And then not only that, you've landed on your feet and now are using your voice to help others, which frankly, it echoes everything that we stand for, because our mantra, one of the gazillion that Jamie and I spiel out on a regular basis, is to lead with light. So, and that's why I said to you before when I talked to you briefly, like, you're leading with light, you're leading with courage, you're getting out there. I mean, you're a news anchor, right? Like, you're a public figure, and you're like, by the way, this is me. And I think that is what everyone in all walks of life needs to see, hear, and feel on a regular basis. So I commend you. I'm a little late in the game, but I commend you for your bravery.
I agree.
Thanks for the compliment.
I think that I totally agree. And I'm excited to unpack all of that with you today. And one of the things that we really preach and we believe is so much of who we are is what we do, right? Is like, what do you do for a living? Like, do you work? Do you not work? It's so much of who we are. And I think, what we're trying to really shine light on is, okay, so who you are is what you do, and what you do is who you are, right? Mm-hmm. So we unpack that all day, every day with candidates. Like, who are you as a human? What do you want to do with your life? And why? And what are your skills that translate to those things, right? And so having people on our podcast that have done superior things and have battled superior things and have risen and figured out how to get to the other side is really what we're trying to shine light on, because it just humanizes the entire professional experience, right? Here's senior level people that also struggle with whatever it is, from addiction to, something more nominal. But I think that human story is so important to share with our listeners who are career shifters, career seekers, new grads, that it's just like, okay to like kind of struggle a little bit or like figure out your way.
And also to be, by the way, a successful, let's just go there for a second, a successful man, white man, showing vulnerability in a profound way. I mean, it's important to be doing that right now.
Yeah.
It's an on-brand move for the brand. It's an on-brand move for the brand.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jamie. Kick it off.
Our favorite question. What did you want to be? What is your earliest memory of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
It's ironic because it was like I took a roundabout way of getting here, but I always wanted to get into broadcast when I was a kid. My father, and this is like, a therapist's dream. My father used to, when Peter Jennings came on the screen, like nobody could really talk. And to me, I realized the news was important in my house. So I thought, man, like that's important. Like those guys were important. My father listens to them because he doesn't always listen to me. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wow, that's something that I'm attracted to. So, and then also I just kind of had my God-given skills lend itself to that. I'm having back trouble. I had to fill out a form today. And I felt like I didn't feel very smart because I'm just like, I have like, I'm dyslexic, I'm ADD, and I'm making like silly mistakes. Like today's the 8th of April and I'm putting, the year 4/21/8. And it's like, what are you doing? It's like, so my brain doesn't necessarily, of course I corrected and got it right, but my brain doesn't necessarily work like that. I'm more of an orator. I like to write, but so those are my skills. So it all kind of came together. I was always in sports broadcasting, even as a kid. I did basketball games on the radio show when I was in college with Marissa, but I wanted to get into broadcast. I wanted to be out there. I was a ham. I used to hold like rock concerts in front of my family. It's just kind of who I am. So I would hear the dreaded words from my brothers when their friends were over. Stop showing off. It's always the worst. But that was kind of me as a kid.
Sounds like Elliot. My little one's like that.
Yeah.
We always say he's either going to be on air or a comedian or an actor or something. And I do think, Marissa, I think this is maybe proving one of our points again. There are a couple of jobs that when you wanted to be that when you were a kid, it's like 99% of those people are actually doing that thing. And there's not very many of those people. And I think we typically see it in teachers. Like if somebody really wanted to be a teacher, they end up teaching in some capacity. Healthcare workers, nurse, doctors.
But more nurse than doctor, because a lot of people want to be doctors and then discover they don't like blood and stuff.
Right. I'm getting something from Pete today that I don't know that I've really thought about as one of ours, which is, when you grow up with that desire to be in front of an audience, that typically is something that you end up going off to do. Now, for me, I wanted to be a dancer and I still dance on the side, but I'm not like a backup dancer. That's what I thought I was going to be in my life. Right. But here I am now regularly speaking and engaging in front of large audiences, which does correlate in a lot of ways to our theories of when you want to be something from a young age, typically that correlates somewhere in your life or is the exact opposite indicator of what you end up doing. So it is interesting to me that you were kind of always that kind of ham. So walk us through a little bit then of how you got into what you're doing. Like what did you major in? What were your internships? Did you always do broadcasting from the beginning?
It's not necessarily. No, I got into broadcasting. And, I got to talk a little bit of personal as we weave it in because it goes into the professional story.
Please do.
I was broadcasting in college, like I said, doing games on the radio. And then a friend of ours that Marissa and I went to college with, and I kind of worked together. He had a job in New York. I was outside of Philadelphia afterwards for like 6 months after college. And he and I were extremely close. And he said, look, I've got an opportunity for you. You come up to New York City, work with me, we'll live together. And it wasn't like much of a situation that was going on at the time. And I was like, known as, as much as I like to drink and have fun in college, I did kind of learn, I had skills to like grind,
Mm-hmm.
And he and I went up there, and the whole thing that he and I were wrapped up in really started to take off. His name's Todd McShay. So we were working for a company called Football Scouts and the War Room, it was called. And then it basically, we did stuff with the sporting news. It was really, really cool. Personally, I wasn't ready. I mean, Marissa was around. And saw some.
We were very close at this time. This is when it was like a very short window from graduation to before 9/11. Where like and right even before I met Dave, where I was literally would go out on a regular basis. Todd, Pete, Marissa.
Yes.
The three of us.
And the fact of my life was I was hiding from a lot of people. Was once I got to New York, I'd always had like the ism, but I really, when I say the ism, like alcoholism, like I really enjoyed the nightlife. And that consumed me. So, that took me out for a little while. And then I circled back and got into the NBA. I worked in the NBA, kind of got my stuff together, never totally stopped drinking. I worked in the NBA in public relations for about 7 years for the Charlotte Hornets and for the Philadelphia 76ers. I did public relations for them. Which was a real nice job. It was a heady job. You travel with the team. You're doing all kinds of stuff that as a kid, you're like, wow, I would love to do that. But I was never really there because I was always, I was really drinking a lot. And
were you on air at all during those years? Were you being interviewed on air or were you behind the scenes mostly?
I was behind the scenes. So, as public relations representative, a person, like I was basically a liaison between the team's front office and their players and the media. And for me, it was a good fit because, I went to college to be an athlete. I had a heart problem and I couldn't play, but I was kept on scholarship and kept within the program at Richmond. So I kind of knew, I was an athlete. I mean, supposedly, but I know a lot of athletes. I know how to work with them. So it was a good fit. But again, I was never at my full potential and I really flamed out. And I was being interviewed at some points because right before I really flamed out, I was back in Charlotte working for the Hornets on air. But I mean, I hit a wall and, without getting into the details of it, I mean, it was bad. It was bad, and I couldn't stop drinking. And so I got sober. And when I got sober, I was in rehab, and I just really was like, what do you want to do, dude? What do you want to do? I had a full heart and a clear mind. And I said, I wanted to get into broadcasting. And after I was in rehab, I actually went to Marissa doesn't even know this, I don't think. So I went to I was 30 something years old. I went to this really posh rehab called Karen outside of Philadelphia. Maybe it's towards Warnersville. It's where Taylor Swift grew up, like that area.
Hey, Taylor.
Huh?
Just saying hey to Taylor real quick.
Yeah. Hey Taylor, yeah, hopefully she's fine.
Hey Taylor.
So, and if I go too long with this stuff, just give me tell me to wrap.
Not
up.
at all.
Yeah.
I'm hanging on your every word.
So I go to rehab, and I'm getting done there, and they say, hey, you should probably go somewhere else. You don't have really anything going on. And I'm like, what's somewhere else? Basically, they're like, you need to go to a halfway house. And I go to this halfway house, and, I was really into sobriety, and the whole thing was around the 12 steps, and it was really working for me. My life started to change. I started to become fulfilled. But meanwhile, I'm a 32-year-old dude or a 33-year-old dude, and I'm living in a house with 8 to 10 other guys. And a lot of them were younger than me. And you had to get a job. They're like, you got to get a job, dude, or else we won't let you stay in this house. And I was like, okay, and the people had jobs at McDonald's and Starbucks, and I just worked in the NBA. I'm like, I'm not getting these jobs. And long story short, eventually I ended up, and if somebody like Marissa were to have walked in, this was about 10 years ago, I was working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken for 6 months. Now, and I used to think it was outside of Baltimore. If somebody I went to college with walks in here right now, like a Brad Fowler who was living in Annapolis, I mean, I don't know what I would have done, because I kind of just went off the grid to take care of myself. And the reason I bring up that experience is because it sort of shattered my ego. I mean, I still have to shatter my ego every day. I fight that battle, but it shattered my ego, and I was able to realize, okay, it gave me perspective, man, and or ladies, I should say, and it showed me that you need humility. Humility is a big thing that I did not have at all. And so, anyways, I went back and worked in the NBA. I really got my life together. I worked in the NBA D League. I was sober. I still am. I lived in.
Wait, and your contacts were okay. After.
That's a great point.
And by the way, how did you? Obviously, your friends and colleagues knew that you were ill, right?
Yeah.
This is 10 years ago, where the mentality of people, it was pretty modern. They were willing to give you another shot, or they were willing. Okay. So you tapped onto people you knew well and said, I'm better. That's a great point. So yeah, I mean, part of my program is you make amends. I mean, there were I remember, when you get sober, when you're in the kind of condition I'm in, people would see me. I remember I was probably 2 or 3 years sober. I was working at the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas for the NBA Development League. And guys that I work with in Charlotte, when I was really bad in my addiction, saw me, and they could just tell, the light was on. I was different. And that following October, I actually ended up moving back to Charlotte, and I worked for the Hornets basketball team. I started to do broadcasting for them. I did radio, I did digital. But yeah, Marissa, back to the contacts thing. One of the biggest lifelines I ever got thrown, this guy named Billy King was the general manager of the Sixers when I was there. And he was the general manager of the Brooklyn Nets, and they had a team in the NBA Development League. And I just sent Billy a note on a whim because I saw a job opening, that I wanted. And it was in the NBA Development League for the team that the Nets owned. And he just helped me out big time. He believed in me. He saw I was on the other side of it. And it's things like that started to happen to me when I got sober that changed just totally changed my life, because I was living right. So right things started to happen to me. But, it doesn't happen overnight, and not all, there's certain relationships that don't come back into your life. And that is a part of the acceptance that you live with. But, the stuff with how I talked about working at the KFC, that enabled me to get into news, because when I got into news, I moved from Charlotte. I went to Northeast Louisiana. And my life was very
wasn't small. It was big, like in a spiritual perspective, but I was, I'm from the Northeast. I lived in New York. I lived in Philly. I lived in Charlotte. So it was a change. You learn humility through kind of I had that gift of desperation before I got sober, and it just changed my whole perspective.
You've said some really interesting things already, like mantras that are like nuggets that I'm like hanging on to. Like, I was living right, so right things started to happen to me. I think that is, yes, yours is an extreme example because of what you've gone through. But I think that's so much of what we talk about so much, like all the time, which is so much what we talk about so much. But it's really, I'm like a loss for words. It's what you put into the universe and what the universe gives back to you. I mean, that's one of the things that Marissa and I say to our clients and candidates and listeners all the time. It's just, you're starting to do this quote unquote light work, right? You're working on yourself. You're working with others are seeing the light in you. And this is so much of what we say to others. Like, if you lead with light and you bring light to others, that's when success starts to happen to you. So before we wrap our Facebook feed, I'd love to hear just quickly we've obviously gone over a little bit of your aha moments, but if you could just give us a quick overview of what you're doing now with the podcast, where you're working now. Obviously you're an anchor, you moved to news. Would love to just hear the quick overview.
You've really channeled your Southern roots.
I know,
yeah,
right?
totally.
I know.
So tell us,
the guy from Philly has gone all over the Southeast.
I know, and
now
I'm in Central Texas. I'm in Waco, so I'm right between Dallas and Austin. And
the only reason I know Waco is not the only reason.
Joe.
Yeah, totally. Joe out of Gaines. Yep.
Yeah. So basically, I thought, let me get this thing off my phone. So I thought, I didn't think I'd be here for long, and I actually have ended up really enjoying it. One of the things, and this leads to the podcast, the station I work for, I'm on in the morning, it's CBS affiliate here. They allow me to do this podcast. I do play-by-play for sports. I do stuff for ESPN. I do production for ESPN. And, that's a big deal. So I'm kind of like working based out of here, and I'm able to do all these different things. The focus is.
I like that. That's nice that you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and not everybody lets you do that. And which kind of keeps me here. It makes, I like that about this station a lot. And they know my story. That's another thing. And that brings me to the podcast. I've been sober for over 9 years, and I went to the guy, our general manager, and I told him, hey, I've got this idea. I want to do a podcast about recovery. I've just been moved to do this forever. And I always thought, okay, I'll do it when, I always thought, honestly, there was a fear-based thing. I was like, I'll wait till I'm in New York, and I've got enough leverage with my career that it won't burn me. Because I figure, until I'm, quote unquote, this is the ego now, big time, that I'll be vulnerable, and you're always going to be vulnerable. Anyways, I did it. I talked to other people about doing the podcast. I asked my general manager; he was on board. News director's on board, and the podcast is I sit down with one person every week, and we go through their journey of what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, and it's the people I talk to because I'm attracted to people that work a program like me, a 12-step program. I don't represent Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's what saved my life. And it's what gave me a life. So when I talk about 12-step program, that's what I'm talking about. And I feature these people, and we go on their journey. And it's the ups and the downs, and it's the ups and downs in sobriety. Like, my life is not all unicorns and rainbows, but I have a place to go and people to talk to. When the SHAT hits the fan. And so that's what the podcast is about. I talk to people about the freedom that comes with recovery, because when I was drinking and using, the last thing I wanted to do was stop, because I thought, I don't know how I'll be able to have fun. I just don't know how I'll be able to exist. What will I do without this stuff? And it's all BS, but it takes a lot of work, and you kind of grind through the beginning, and then you end up wearing life like a loose shirt sometimes at some point.
Another good nugget. I like that. Wearing life like a loose shirt. Well, on that note, we'll say bye to our Facebook audience, because I think, if you want to hear the rest of Pete's story, which I can't wait to hear, you'll have to find us on all platforms now. We're so excited to say we are now available on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. So check us out there. We're also going to try to see if we can feature this, just a small, plug, as a special episode of Pete's podcast. So we'll see if we can Figure that out. So check us out there. If you want to hear the rest of this great interview, find us on your podcast apps.
Go Spiders.
Go Spiders.
Go Spiders.
Go Blue. I always throw that in.
This episode is brought to you by Smart Food. There are a bunch of ways to be smart during the holiday season. Getting the shopping done early, not sitting your aunt next to your mom, and snacking on Smart Food popcorn. It's air pop popcorn tossed in delicious white cheddar cheese or sweet and salty kettle corn. You are what you eat. Welcome to the Smart Club. Shop now at snacks.com.
Annie had an earache on a Saturday of all days. So her mom brought her to Minute Clinic at CVS, where you can see a provider, fill a prescription, and grab essentials like pain relief products, all in one visit. Even on evenings and weekends. You can even see us online with telehealth options. For quality, affordable care on your schedule, visit Minute Clinic at CVS. That's how healthier happens together. Services vary by location. Prescriptions can be obtained at pharmacy of choice. Visit MinuteClinic.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Minute Clinic at CVS. Whether you wake up feeling sick on a Sunday or your little one has a sore throat at the airport, you and your family can get quality virtual care from a board-certified Minute Clinic provider 7 days a week. Go to minuteclinic.com/virtual care to learn more. Services and appointment availability may vary.
Jamie, you know how much I love to give somebody a gift that I'm passionate about, right?
Oh my gosh, of course.
I find something, we're tagging, we're sharing, we're DMing each other.
We have the megaphone. We have the megaphones.
Yes. The minute I love something, it's like I want to give it to every single person I love because that's the way you and I work. That's the way I felt when I was gifted a Taja candle with a customized little saying that meant something specifically for me. And it smelled good and it lasts forever. And it's just gorgeous. For the Dreamcatchers, everything for us, both Marissa, myself, and Jamie, is about leading with light. So it makes perfect sense that our favorite gift to give is just that, a beautiful gift of light from our friends Annabelle and Taja Collection in Miami.
It's female founded. They're handmade in Miami in small batches. Everything on the candle is fully customizable. So you can customize the front, the lid, the underneath of the lid, the scent. And then the actual candles are reusable as vases.
And I also find when you don't know what to get somebody, a candle is just always the best gift. And for me, the littlest things make me super, super happy. And if it's a gorgeous candle, I feel like I'm spoiled.
I totally agree with you. And they're 100% soy wax and free of all junk. So you're not like inhaling grossness when you're burning them in your home. If you want to try Taja Collection for yourself, check them out. www.tajacollection.com. That's TAJA. Use code DREAMCATCHERS10 for 10% off. Okay, so Pete, so now we're not on air anymore live, like physical, but still really excited to have this rest of this conversation. So that being said, you know, you've said so many amazing nuggets already, obviously, that I'm just like absorbing. I like want to be writing them down. Wearing life like a loose shirt. I love that. You know, I'm a big Glennon Doyle fan, and as I think most of us are, and I read her book this year, and I've actually read both of her. She has 3, but I read her second book just a couple of weeks ago. I finished it, and it's all about her addiction. And she has now made like a full life, right, about being sober and empowering women, mostly women, but empowering women to live their best life. And, you know, it's so amazing to me how much I relate to her, even though I myself am not an addict or, you know, a recovering anything, but everything she says is so applicable to my life. And it's just amazing and inspiring to me that like what you've been able to go through and that you quote unquote had to go through is can be really translated to almost anybody's struggles. And as I read some of her work or I'm listening to the things you're saying, like, I think it's very universal, the language you're speaking.
So yeah, I want to say something about that because I was listening to that too. I think I want to choose my words wisely, obviously, because you don't want to devalue the importance of the 12-step program for somebody that's actually sick, right?
Sure.
But for those of us that are not sick, believe you me, I bet most of us could really benefit from the belief system, the structure of the 12-step program.
Sure.
The acceptance, the forgiveness, I only know a few of them off the top of my head, just from life or pop culture or whatever. But the ability to be able to stare at your demons and make peace with them is not something that most of us get to do. Most of us actually hide from the things that are scary for us.
Marissa, what you just said shows a lot about your attitude and your perspective, because you said it's not something most of us get to do. And that right there is like, to come from that place, because it really is a reward, but it sure doesn't feel like it when somebody talks about doing it or taking an inventory or facing their demons or fears or whatever. Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard. And, I think about you're first of all, I mean, granted, I did not remember, but why would I, about you having ADD or dyslexia. You had struggles as a kid. You were an athlete on scholarship and then couldn't play. What was your major with us again? You were communications. Okay. Yeah. So I think I remember being in classes with you, but I think it was because I almost minored in journalism, and I think we overlapped.
Yeah, and I took a bunch of journalism classes.
I think we were in those classes together. There was one professor I really liked. He had a mustache, beard, or something. I don't remember. But I was going to minor and then didn't have enough time.
Maybe Hank Noor or Hank Noor.
Yes.
Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah. I really liked communications, but I didn't have room because the way school was, it was just so business focused. I didn't have flexibility to do anything else when I majored. But I just think about you holding down the pace that we had to hold. Like it was tough where we were. And then to not have the
skills. I mean, the basic, like you're different. And that's, the type of guy that I am, it just didn't lend itself to like the structured school environment. I heard a story once, when I was a kid, they put me on Ritalin, which is like fine, but it didn't work for me. I think if a parent, I'm not telling anybody how to parent their kid. It works for some people. It didn't work for me. And, I heard a story once about this woman, and I don't exactly remember who she was. She was anyways, this woman goes, she's a girl and she can't pay attention in school at all. And she's acting out constantly. And her mom brings her to this doctor. This is like in the 30s. And the doctor is like, I don't know what to do. And he looks out in the hallway and he sees the girl kind of twitching and then dancing around. And she's beautifully dancing. And the doctor says to his mom, he's like, your daughter doesn't need more structure in school. Like, she needs to go be a dancer. And the woman turned out to be one of the greatest dancers, like, in like Switzerland. And the basic, as it was told to me, a lot of times that kid would be put on, hey, let's give him some ADD meds and get him structured and get him in an environment. And it's not, I think the schooling system is fine. I'm not here to reinvent that wheel. But for certain people, I think that it was hard. The structure was hard for me, like you said. And
you didn't fit. By the way, we can have this conversation at a whole other time. I didn't fit the traditional model of things either, but you wouldn't have known that about me, right? Yeah. So I think there are a lot of things in life that when you don't fit into the colored line, when you can't color between the lines, you don't know how to figure out how to belong. So you look for other ways to cope. Totally. And obviously you were predispositioned for your addiction, but even so, you managed to go from one job to the next where you were in, for what it's worth, a pretty high profile position considering you were not well. So you managed to either fool the audience or fool yourself and fool them both, right? Into controlling it. And then, needless to say, now you're doing all the things that you wanted to be doing. So no, let me just be clear for our audience, our job seeking audience. Yeah. You are the morning news anchor, correct?
Morning news anchor at KWTX in Central Texas. I get up, we cover like this area, obviously we cover Waco, and then we have a pretty big reach of like Bell County, which is towards Austin, and we go up north, this city called West. So it's Texas is huge. So we cover a pretty big, obviously, so we cover a pretty big chunk of Texas. But yeah, I get up every morning at I'm supposed the 2:30, 2 a.m., 2:30.
It's like basically bedtime right now.
No, we're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there.
Luckily you don't have cocktail hour anymore.
No, I don't have cocktail.
It's perfect for you. You don't even have to worry about it.
But it's funny, and I like to go out with people. I like to go to restaurants and bars and socialize. But at the same time, it's a kind of, you can get at anything when you tell somebody, hey, I got to wake up at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So during the week, and it's the truth. So during the week, it's a weird way to live. I'm not going to make any, tell you that it's like this terrific like lifestyle that I've completely adjusted to. Every Monday, I'm like, whoa. I mean, because I do regular stuff on the weekend. I go out with friends. I stay up late. It's kind of crazy. Like when even coming out of my mouth, I still can't believe I get up at 2 a.m. and arrive at work between 3 and 3:30. And that's the thing. Like sometimes you'll live crazy and go to bed at 8. It's like, but then you don't feel great the next day.
It's like still sunny out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's tough
in the summer. So do you sleep? This is really important. Do you sleep with a sleep mask?
Yeah, I have a mask and I have like a sound machine.
Yeah, me too. But I don't sleep those hours. It's impossible to go to bed at 8 p.m. Like when the sun's up.
That's why I love the fall. I love anything before daylight saving.
Wow. Okay. So the aha, your moment, you sat your manager down, you kick off this podcast. Now, how many guests have you had so far?
I think 10. I just did one with a woman who grew up outside of Philadelphia where I grew up, and she is in the medical field, and her name's Courtney. She just couldn't stop drinking. She almost she was going to go to jail, and she kept drinking. She had racked up DUIs, and she got sober and had to go in front of a medical board and like explain herself. But at this time she'd been sober for a little while. This is just part of her story. And she told everybody, the guys on the medical board the truth. And these 3 doctors actually had experience with recovery, and they believed in her, and they believed, she was on the right path. And now her life, that's kind of her aha moment, right? And now her life is so full, beautiful, child, a beautiful family, a beautiful husband. It's just really cool. So, and it's important for me too, because honestly, as an alcoholic male, you deal a lot with males. Like, it's just kind of the way it is. Like I talk to sober women, but I mean, like, it's a different experience. I mean, and it sounds old school, and progress is being made on all fronts, but it is, one of the questions I asked her, I said, what is it like? What's unique to being an alcoholic woman? We talked about that. But so I've tried to make an effort to have, I think I've had 4 women on it and maybe 6 guys.
So, and that's interesting. On one dimensional, our careers tend to play into more female. Mm-hmm. So we are actually making a conscious effort because we're very inclusive, and want our conversations to not feel predominantly on the female side. Yeah. So thank you for indulging us. And then additionally, back to you and what you're doing. I want to go deep for a second. I'm assuming you're still very active, or at least connect with your groups, or do you still go to meetings?
I mean, I went to a meeting yesterday. I have a sponsor. I have a kid that I'm sponsoring.
So you're active in that, right? So,
when I'm not active in it, I heard a guy tell me this just the other day, and it's true. When I don't get to meetings for a couple days, I start to feel it. And when I don't go for like a week, like everybody starts to feel it. Everybody around me, because the way I owe it to the people around me to stay.
So I have 2 things to say about that, and then I'm going to get back to my point. When you are a healer, which you got to your role in a very trying way, but when you are a healer and that's your God-given gift, if you're not healing others, you don't feel good yourself. So it is something, by the way, I feel that too. When I'm not helping other people, I can't feel like I'm putting on my own oxygen mask. So there is some sort of, there's something correlates there. Obviously you need to be going to your meetings so that you stay sharp and you stay focused on your whole thing. But the truth is you're needed because you're needed. And that what goes around comes around. What I was going to ask you is when you're at your meetings, have you seen an uptick? Because we joke around, okay? Everyone jokes around. There's a lot of memes about it.
I laugh at it.
But there's a lot of stuff that's happened in this year where people that you would never think would go AWOL have slipped. Have you seen that around you?
Yeah, I mean, I know people who have relapsed, sure, and I know people, the transition from meetings in person to Zoom, we all have this voice in our head. Not we all. I know. I'll speak for myself. I have, Joe Namath is sober, and he calls the voice in his head slick, because like you'll be in a hotel with a big bottle of wine, in your room in a nice hotel, and slick will be like, you can have one drink. Like, no, you can't, and a lot of people, I think that voice in their head got to talking to them when the transition was made from, in-person meetings to Zoom. A lot of people just kind of, hang on one sec, let me decline this. A lot of people just kind of fell off. A lot of people, and I don't know that they drank, but there's a lot of people I used to see 3-4 times a week who I don't see at all anymore.
The radar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they're not coming to meetings.
No, they're not. But the Zoom meetings are, I have a meeting that I'm on with guys from outside of Philadelphia, really, and it's 4 times a week, and it's gotten huge. I mean, there's great recovery in the Zoom thing, but you got to be willing. And I'm not saying everybody's relapsed, but to what you're saying, I think it has been a trying time for a lot of people. And I know some people personally who have slipped. And I think that's a cool thing too. On the other side of that, you have young guys or new people who come around who have gotten sober and stayed sober through a freaking pandemic. It's like, if you can
stay sober through a pandemic, you can do anything. Yeah. Right? Because that's my point is for the rest of us that are not addicts, right?
Yeah.
There's obviously something different in our brain framework that's been proven in science. But like there's been, I would say less so now in like the year anniversary of it. But that first and second, I don't want to say quarter, but like, spring and summer last year, even very normal passive drinkers.
For sure.
We couldn't get through a day without drinking.
Yeah.
So, and I said, I'm like, I see where this could go awry. You can see it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where normal people are, you got like, and that's one last thing I'll say, Jamie, is I can't afford that luxury. Like, to the real alcoholic is constantly trying to convince himself why I can drink like Marissa. And I'm not saying you drank a ton during the quarantine, but Marissa's drinking more now. So there's got to be a way that I can figure it out and I can do it. If you're an alcoholic, you can't ever get that right. And once you've gone through all the doors, I mean, I'm done having fun. I know that. I know if I were to drink again, I wouldn't have any fun.
I love that perspective. And I think what I was going to say is that, we all have our vices, obviously, and we have all leaned on those vices this year more than most, right? As Marissa's chugging her like third coffee.
I'm sorry, let me just take my 5 p.m. coffee.
Whatever gets us through the day.
I'm sorry.
Whatever gets us through the day. But I think what's a really interesting point that you're making, Pete, which I think I knew this. There's 2 things I want to say. I think I knew this, but like it is really fascinating and so impressive to hear you say, like, you're doing this every day. Like, this is like 4 times your week you're meeting with that group. And like, this is like true commitment.
Like, it's a job. Like you have to work on yourself every single day to stay well.
Right. So certain things, for example, exercise for me as somebody that always struggled with weight and mental wellness that way, like I needed to work out in order to feel better every day. That was my vice during quarantine. Right. So it is so interesting when you point that out, that this is like true commitment in practice. That's one. And the other thing I was going to say, which we talked about very at length with our guest about teen suicide in January. Her name is Susan Talone. She's amazing. She talks about how suicide it's just a moment, right? It's one moment. And what is so fascinating to me about addiction and mental wellness as a whole is that's all that, falling off is for somebody like yourself too, or any of us. right? It's just a whoops. And all of a sudden your life is completely forever changed.
And you gotta keep slick at bay.
Yeah.
But what I like also about the concept of the moment is that the moment can be the other way too, right? So here's Pete, and he has the moment, and now his life is forever better because his moment was that he made the decision to get better. Yeah. And that is like something he's committed to for the last 9.5 years, worked at KFC, came out of it. And that, I'm guessing, is the payoff.
Yeah, it is.
By the way,
absolutely. And one thing I want to add, this is an example of why you got to keep working it. And this is just how my brain works. You know, I'm having like all kinds of back trouble, right? Because I love to run and I'm getting older. And other stuff has happened in my life. I recently got into a car accident, but I'm fine. Yeah. Everything's good. Yeah, but so anyways, the guy was like, "Hey, we're gonna, you know, you're okay with medicines, right?" And right away I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Now he wasn't even thinking about giving me like codeine or anything like that, but I just said, "Yeah," and I'm like, it was like the longest 60 seconds of my life before I was like, but like non-narcotics, like, and that's like in my mind for 60 seconds, I was thinking like, maybe I can. My back hurts. Yada yada. Now, as a sober person, if I have back surgery and it's major pain and they give me stuff, I take it. You know what I mean? Like, and you talk to other people around you and they're sober, but I can get through the day with the pain I'm having now without medicine, right? Without like some kind of codeine or whatever. But like my mind for that 60 seconds was like, yeah, maybe I can. And so I had to tell the guy right away, you know, I can't. So you're not constantly, but that voice is still there. You know, it'll pop up once in a while.
Fascinating. So, you know, tell us a little bit more about, you know, obviously we spent a lot of time on the personal stuff, and I love this because it's so integrated into who you are. Tell us a little bit about the professional, besides obviously waking up at 2 a.m. Tell us how you made the shift to news, you know, how it's going in that. And then also would love to hear like how the pandemic obviously affected your industry, because so many people were, you know, broadcasting from home. Did you guys do that? Obviously you're back in the studio, I'm guessing. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in your current
Let's be fair. He's also in Texas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I never work from home.
No, listen, I don't know who's going to be listening to this. I love all my red states. I went to school. I like my sweet tea. I like all of it. But you know what? Do you have a pandemic in Texas, Pete?
We have one. I'm not a
word on the street is maybe not.
Yeah. No, I'd love to hear what your and that's just the way the news covers it, right? But I wanted to say though, first of all, my last trip before the pandemic was to Austin, and my first ever time to Texas, and I absolutely loved it. That's just an aside. My favorite, like literally.
The original Whole Foods is there.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
Loved.
Yes, loved my trip. So tell us a little bit more about your current day-to-day, being a news anchor, all the things. Go ahead.
Well, you know, it's unique in a sense where I'm a morning anchor. We talked about the hours, but it's also a different brand of news in a sense where it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours now. So 4:30 to 7, I'm on the air. And then the reason I bring that up is it gives me a chance to insert my personality, and that's what I like. You know, I don't like, you know, and this is another thing too about overcoming stuff, you know, I mean, I was dyslexic and now I read the news for like 70%. You know, when I started as a news anchor, I was like, it was like a showdown between me and the teleprompter, like, cause I was, you know, dyslexic, but like, you know, like anything, and that goes back to the KFC thing, right? Like you learn to kind of fail and you learn to get through stuff. I remember thinking in my first job as an anchor, like if I can get through this KFC stuff, I can get through anything. So, you know, I basically a big part of our day is we come in, the show is produced. I get to, you know, I read half of the show. My co-anchor reads the other half. I'll read my scripts over. I'll write some scripts. I'll insert some stuff. And then I go out and we anchor the show. Because of the pandemic, we don't go out there together. We go half and half. She goes a half hour. I go a half hour. And you know, and other things that I can do is use my platform to do stuff I like. Like I have a segment where for kids who need to be adopted through CPS, I'll feature them once a week. It's called like Wednesday's Child in other cities. Yeah, here it's Finding a Family, and I've done that for 4 years since I got here. I love doing that. And you know, you mentioned the pandemic. You also get to go out and do stories and report live on breaking news when that stuff happens. I mean, which brings me to the pandemic. that really changed my life, being in the news during the pandemic, because, you know, I love what I do. And I do appreciate the fact that as a morning news personality, people get to know you. You know, I go out and I see people, and they feel comfortable going up and saying hello and talking to you. You're part of the, you know, their morning family.
You're part of their morning. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel a connection with the people that watch us. I'm still blown away that somebody would start their day with me, you know, anybody. So anybody, a woman, anybody. So, anyways, like, the pandemic was huge because I really felt like we mattered. I mean, like, there were people that were struggling that needed to hear from the governor, and I was able to interview the governor, and so the governor could talk to Texans through me. I mean, I talked to Governor Abbott many times on the air, which was cool. And then we also had, you know, food banks and stuff where people needed to know where to go to get, like, food. I mean, it's like, I don't think of that, but I probably should more often. And it was, you kind of, you know, I don't take what I do too seriously. I try not to take myself too seriously, but at the same time, I was like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. People need to know information. I mean, we always, if there's a murder on the loose and it's outside somebody's neighborhood, we need to tell them what's going on so they can stay safe and close their doors and whatever. But this was a whole nother level.
It's really fascinating and amazing of what you do. And we're having so many amazing conversations in the last year of people who are making a difference in some way. And it is so refreshing to hear your perspective on that. Like, that is, you're actually making a difference. You are helping others to stay informed, which is helping them to live their lives, which is a really interesting way of thinking about it. I love that. So
you're also providing, let's be honest, you're also providing pattern and continuity.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always admired about a news anchor, and I've actually noticed it, it's missing from my life now because I don't get up at the same time and I don't commute at the same time. So I also, admittedly, in all due respect to you, can take in less news because when I take in too much news, I can't function. But when I used to commute, the morning news, that was part of my routine. So you are actually providing healing by being there for everybody every morning you're their friend. Like you're there, like when they wake up and they're drinking their coffee and they're trying to figure out how they can put one foot in front of the other today. Well, there's Pete, he managed to do it and he's there every day. And the truth is you can't undervalue how important it is to see somebody that you depend on and that you're like actually having relationships with your viewers, especially when they're really needing, right?
Yeah. And
they look forward to your jokes or whatever it is that you provide. And that's really, really important. And then also, not for nothing, you guys have had a ton of news this year.
We have, yeah.
You didn't just have that. You had the storms, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had to sleep and work a couple nights. We stayed at a hotel that was right next door to work, and then that wasn't even close enough. We actually had to stay at work to make sure we could make it there. By the way, just to bring it around full circle to the podcast and the sobriety thing, you know, I had this trust that I built with the morning viewers over the course of 4 years, and then, you know, the station, I didn't even really want to do something. This woman, Julie Hayes, I work with, was like, if you're doing a podcast, like, I want to feature you, write a story on you, and have an interview with you.
I saw this, by the way.
Yeah.
I saw this.
And so I was almost more nervous about that than anything. And people have been so gratuitous and generous with, like, hey, complimenting and saying that impacted me. So now you have one of your friends who you said you have your pattern with, and now they're opening up about this. I had no clue. I wish I could tell you that was part of the idea. It wasn't. That's, you know, that's bigger than me. That's God, the universe, you know.
I must have Googled or looked up something and I saw that and it was phenomenal. And the truth really does behold. I mean, that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation. We weren't raised that way. We weren't raised to have our inside selves on the exterior.
Oh, no.
So, you know, and I do think the generation behind us will be yielding their insides a lot easier on the outside. And I think that the work in progress is happening out now from all of us in all angles. But you being that fixture and then somebody that really, really cares about you, you know, in the way that they do, your viewer, now knows this other piece about you is phenomenal and also really impactful for what the work that you're doing with the Payoff. Because you may be touching them in a way that they would never even know that you're also that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's pretty crazy. I still, it's a cool thing. It really is.
And that's a good segue then to, I'd love to hear from you advice that you might have for, whichever audience you choose to talk about. You could say, the audience listening to your podcast, or the audience that is your, next generation that wants to get into broadcasting. Like, what advice do you have for a job seeker for the type of career path you've gone through? Obviously you've been open-minded and flexible, which is something we talk about all the time. Like, here you are, a Northeast guy in sports. Now you're doing news in Texas. Like, what's your kind of advice for our listener as far as that goes? Like, as far as being flexible and moving into a career in what you've done in broadcasting?
I do get, I get to talk to people that are coming around trying to get sober, and they help me stay sober. But I also get to talk to people trying to get in the news industry, trying to get into sports. And, one of the big things I tell them, and this is kind of weird, see what you guys think about this, just from what you guys do with your, industry with fashion and stuff. Like, interning for me is, I think it's huge. And it's kind of dipped a little bit because of the pandemic. And I hope to see it come back. I mean, there are still interns, but there's something about taking a job for very little or no money, which not everybody can afford to do. But when you're out of college, sometimes you can. I'll put that out there. With doing something you love and being around it. I got into public relations in the NBA because I moved to Colorado Springs and was an intern for USA Basketball. And I was just like, okay, this is where the opportunity is. I went there. And then my next job was in the NBA in Charlotte. But I think interning is really important. The willingness to just get your foot in the door as a young kid.
Agree. And I think in a weird way, we're seeing that, or we're hoping that, even if it's just, which in a weird way is a silver lining with the whole Zoom virtual thing, right? So if you can't get a traditional internship the way it would look prior, you have no excuse almost at this point of not being able to, quote, be around it, like you just said, which I love, of somebody that inspires you, something you want to be doing. You can connect to almost anyone at this point digitally, which we did not have. We didn't have LinkedIn. We didn't have these ways to connect to others who do what we do. There was no podcast. There was no way to absorb information from somebody who inspires you, right? Yeah. So that, I think, in and of itself, if not a traditional internship, is now such a benefit to this generation of being able to at least absorb information from those types of industries, whether it be from podcasts or reaching out to them on LinkedIn, setting up virtual coffees, joining networking groups like what Marissa and I have created. That kind of stuff is so empowering. Like, here you are, Marissa's friend from college, but you're a public figure in your world, and you're spending time talking to an audience, which you're also doing with your own podcast that people out there can consume and feel like they might be able to connect you in some way and learn about your industry and learn about you. And then they can take that into their career path, which is a very unique thing. So I agree with you about the internship, but if it doesn't uptick just yet, there are other ways to then still consume or be around the industries that you want to be in, which I think
there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. It's really important, and it's hard to write this script, but if you can figure out what you want to do early on, you can do anything. And that's so cliche, but chase your dream. If I had known, and I had the best experience at Richmond, and now, here I am because of that. But if I was a little more, I would have gone to a school with better broadcasting. I would have busted my ass to try to go to Syracuse and walk on the football team or play there and use that comm school to really,
meanwhile, David, who you met before, my husband went to Newhouse.
Oh, exactly. So that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And I didn't have that vision when I was younger. So even if you do wake up as a sophomore or junior and you say, okay, now I want to get into broadcasting, get your rear end down at the TV station or the radio station. You've got to get reps. I can't speak for other jobs, but for me, you got to be on air to get better, period. Some people have it when the light comes on, But if you're going to be in broadcast, you have got to practice broadcasting in front of a microphone, in front of an audience, in front of a red light. That, to me, is critical. Because when I started, like I said, I did live broadcasts for the NBA and all that stuff. But when I got in the studio and I was reading from a prompter, and then I was ad-libbing, and then I was interviewing people, and there's lights here, lights there, cameras there. You can't really fake that. You have to experience that over and over and over again to get comfortable. So that is a big thing. Like, get reps, however your career in your industry allows for you to get reps. I mean, period.
It's so funny you say that. We're both actually big Peloton fans. And I think of this often, by the way, because I obviously do this and I quote unquote am on air, but in a different kind of way. Yeah. And I watch them and they're so inflappable. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're looking this way and then all of a sudden they're looking this way, also teaching, and they're practicing. And like, that's not even close to the same thing, but a similar vibe for me, because I consume it every day. Like, it really is such a skill in and of itself, of being able to like know where to look and how to engage with the camera. In fact, we're also big American Idol fans. And when you watch them try to, these like, you know, kids from Oklahoma trying to like figure out what camera to look at when they're live, that is like a real skill. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. So I think that's great advice. Like, especially if you want to get into broadcasting, you got to get out there and record and hustle. I mean, and
by the way, not for nothing, no matter where you are, this is a fun tip. No matter where you are, you could do this job. Meaning, like, you can find a local, your local
anything
anchor or news organizations. Even like, not for nothing. I mean, when you live in suburbia, I mean, sometimes you'll reflect, sometimes I'll grab onto what's on like that New Jersey station because it matters to me. Yeah. Right. Like, I need to know, or I want to see what's the traffic jam there. Like, I just want to look really fast. And I mean, that's real stuff. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I mean, sure, end game might be that you want to be, the next, Katie Couric, or, even look what Jenna Bush has done, or, anybody. But like, at the end of the day, there's a million cities in this country that need people.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
To work in the newsroom.
And you want to get, I'll tell you an interesting story. Like, when you want to be ready. I did play-by-play for the NBA Entertainment, and they put me in a studio show to do the NBA Development League draft for NBA Entertainment. It was a big show. And honestly, this was like 6 years ago. I wasn't ready. I was terrible. And it was like, it was humbling. And it was what it was. And then you look back, fast forward, just this winter, because of the pandemic and people are spread so all over the place, ESPN needs guys to call games, play-by-play. And I know how to do play-by-play because I've done it before. But I've also been on air a lot over the past like 6 years. So I'm just ready. So they asked me to do these games. And I did well enough where I keep getting asked back. And that's right. Like, you've got, like, I wasn't ready when that happened with that first opportunity I talked about, because I just didn't have the reps. And, you want to be ready when you get the opportunity. So any way you can get those reps to make yourself ready, that's huge.
I think that's really good advice in general. I think that's very obviously specialized to broadcasting, but just being ready. Like, when you get the call, like I just actually today, as we mentioned earlier, we are running this networking group now called the Dreamcatcher's Web. It's an extension of our podcast, and it's kind of an aggregator of all the folks we've ever interviewed, and then all of these new grads and everyone in between, trying to give them a space and a home to kind of come together. And we also have Dreambassadors, like ambassadors on campus. And so our Michigan ambassador, which is because of my relationship with my school, texted me today and send me a screen grab of a potential opportunity that she was going to, explore for an interview. And, we're going back and forth about it. And she's like, do you think this is an interview, or do you think this is a job offer? Like, what should I do? I'm like, doesn't matter. Say yes. Just anything you can do. The opportunity. It doesn't matter. Like, she was like a little fixated about whether or not she should call the person back, or what do you think she should say? I'm like, I don't care. Just say yes, get the practice, do it anyway, and because at the end of the day, that will end up breeding the good energy that you need to find the job. So
it's also important to surround yourself with people like you, people like Marissa, people you can ask those questions that'll give you those answers. I had a huge support, like, You know, my buddy Matt Devlin, who's from the New York area, he's now the Raptors TV guy. He did a lot of NFL, and he's a guy that I'll talk to when I have big stuff happen in my life professionally, and he'll guide me in the right way. It's just great to have those people.
Have you? And I don't know this answer because I am coming from my naive, only don't pay attention to sports that much case. Have you had the professional opportunity to cross paths to work together again with Todd?
No, I have not. I would look for someday. I would be a lucky man if that were to happen.
Yeah. So for anyone that's listening, and also for Jamie, I mean, these are two of my really dear friends.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you some good stories about Todd. We were.
But I mean, even so, like, regardless, to me, you're Pete and you're Todd. Like, until every once in a while I see Todd's face in my bedroom, which is an ironic moment. When I see it on the TV, I'm like, oh my God, there's Todd. And it's been like that for a really long time for me because you were my friends. But my point is for both of you to have landed and or have had that friendship and then had the interest in sports and then started in your career together and then both actually be successful in your own right.
I mean, he's super successful. I'm not even going to put myself in the same conversation. But here's the thing. And I do want to say this about Todd. Remember that person I just talked about that know what you want to do? He really did.
He was very focused.
When we were in college, he was working out of his closet, focused on, he wanted to work in the NFL. Yeah. And we lived in New York together. We had a place on 107 East 63rd. I was like 22. I was out of my mind. In the meantime, I was partying every night. I was loving it. He was like working. He would party a little bit, but he would get back to work. He just always had that in him. He knew what he wanted to do at a young age. And that is important. If you can, if you're young and you're watching this or you're thinking about careers, Todd knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was like a pit bull. He locked on it early on and he never let go.
I like this, and I feel like we can wrap a little bit with our finale questions after this. But what I like about this conversation, and so much of what Jamie and I talk about is for the person like I was, or like Jamie was, where they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do, or what they wanted to do was not as finite. Like I was a double major in business and marketing, and all I wanted to do was work in beauty, and I was blinders on about it. So, and my friends in the business school knew that. I created thesis around it. All my internships were around beauty. LOL.
Best dressed woman in Richmond, and I'm not just. You were always.
No, like I was like, I can't get a job in that industry out of Richmond. They want me to work in the marketing department at Accenture, and I was like, that's not going to work for me. But the point is, not that there's anything wrong with that, it just wasn't for me. So the point is when you truly know what you want to do. So this is the first time I actually think we've had a conversation this specific. And then it's of course about sobriety also, which is also hard work, which is obviously the number one thing. But when you really know that you want to do something, you've got to get on it. And and it's not to say that you can't catch up, because what's meant to be in life is meant to be. But when you have that burn, the sooner you start working on that burn, the better off you will be down the road. And I don't know if we've had upwards of 50 guests that we've interviewed. And I'm not sure if any of them were in a field where they were like, I want to do this. And that end game was something as specific and or as poignant as what you do. So, I hope that anybody out there that wants to get into, listen, one of my first real wants, I don't talk about this that often, as I was a sportscaster in my high school. Nice. And I was a Northern Valley news reporter, but the fine line is I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the courage to do the travel. I didn't want to live in Kansas. Yeah. I didn't have the balls to do it.
Yeah.
And
I think a good sum up of this conversation is that, when
hard work pays off,
you go after it. What?
Hard work pays off.
Hard work pays off. One, but also when you want something, you go after it. But I think one of the messages that I do want to come back to, which I think is important for some of our listeners, is it's okay if you can't get the dream job, right? It's then finding the dream in the job you do get, right? So if you can't get the dream job, which maybe Pete's dream job is not Waco, no offense to Waco, but he's finding the dream in the job in Waco, and he's figuring out his way in a world where, as he mentioned at the top of the conversation, he's in a position where he's done working by 7:30 in the morning. And then he has his day to do some of these side hustles in his passions, which are sports or play-by-play announcing or coaching or working with others in AA or doing his podcast. And that is such a cool testament to showing that even if you don't get the full dream job, you find the dreams in the jobs. And that is something that is so important to share. Marissa and I like to say we're pretty close to our dream job now. It's taken us a long time to get here, and the podcast has helped us in being able to really say that what I do is my life's mission. Like, this is what I was put on this planet to do, which is talk to others and help others turn their lights on. And and that it's hard work. It's hard, but hard work pays off, as we like to say. Yeah. So to wrap, we like to ask a couple of questions to wrap, but our last professional question, and then we can ask more of a personal question. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, obviously for you specifically, your answer is probably a little bit different than most. Tell us what inspires you and keeps you going. So we talked about you like to run. What is it that you consume or do to stay inspired? Who inspires you? What inspires you to keep going, both on your sobriety road, but also in your professional life?
I think the people around me inspire me. I'm always surprised by with this second act I have, the people you end up with the best people around you, whether they're people in sobriety, whether they're people out of sobriety. I'm not having conversations like this if I'm not sober. And I swear Marissa's going to give me a hard time about this, but you guys inspire me, doing this pod, I am inspired by the people around me with vision, with goals, with vulnerability, the people that show me who they are. That inspires me. So it's really, I'm inspired by the people who are around me. And today too, you get to choose. I get to choose who I want to be around. They choose me, I can choose them. There's certain people in your life. Even now, I'm I don't know. You know what I mean? I've heard a guy say it once, and you guys can relate in your fashion world, you go in your closet, is this a hell yeah, I want to keep this item? Or is this a maybe? At some point in life, you get rid of the maybes and you're surrounded by hell yeahs. And that's kind of where I think I get a lot of my inspiration is from the people around me. Because I think life is really about connecting with people. And like we're doing here. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true.
So true. I know, I'm guessing you probably do, but I'd love to hear them anyway. Do you have any mantras or any kind of action words or things you say to yourself that you would like to share? I mean, Marissa and I have so many, as she alluded to earlier, so many. Right now, our big one is lead with light, say yes, network most when you need at least. There's so many career-minded mantras that we preach. But do you have any mantras that you say to yourself or to others on a regular?
I have a thing of, and it's kind of hokey. If I have I'm always worried somebody's going to see it, but I don't care. I mean, that's, I have this thing inside my closet door. It just says, keep going. And, that is, I'm surrounded enough by, I mentioned, the people and the program and where I'm going to get the spiritual mantras, just I'm going to fall back into them. Because they're always around me. I'm lucky like that if I keep surrounding myself with the right people. But the keep going thing is the professional persistence, the dogged determination. I don't like waking up at 2 a.m. I don't, there are other places where I have goals of working, but I literally tell my keep going. I wanted to do play-by-play. I just keep going. So now you see the goals kind of start to fall in, but I have got to show up and keep going. There's days when I'm I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to wake up that early. I want to go find another day shift I can work somewhere else. I've had opportunities, but no, I keep going. You're in the right place, and that to me is huge. To keep going, because I think a lot of people in certain industries bail when it gets hard, because it gets hard, you know?
Yeah. Marissa says that all the time. We never give up. We just keep going.
Keep going.
Never give up. You might try to knock me down, but I never, ever give up. Ever.
Never give up. And I think, you know, with that, then, do you consider yourself to have a superpower? Like we believe that everyone has something, whether they realize it or not, that they bring that other people don't bring. What do you think your superpower is?
I think it's vulnerability that comes through sobriety. I think I'm able to I think I'm vulnerable. I mean, I'm a dude who's in his 40s who's vulnerable. I listen. You know, I think vulnerability is a superpower, because you get that light, like the sunlight of the spirit or whatever you want to call it, will shine through you when you're vulnerable and kind of level that ego. And, you know, you're there for other people. You're honest. You get the deal.
So refreshing, this conversation. I love it. Is there anything we didn't get to ask you that you wanted to make sure you covered? We talked a lot about the podcast, but where is it available? Where can people hear it?
You know, luckily I'm just like you guys, all platforms.
Awesome.
So that's cool. I mean, that's about it. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, anybody has any questions about sobriety or job or whatever, just DM me. You know, my stuff will be.
Yeah, that's true. We should do that. You seem somebody that's very approachable, obviously, and receptive to helping others. So if there's anybody in our audience that feels drawn to reach out to Pete, whether it's for professional guidance or for personal intervention support or collaboration, he will absolutely take the time to find you. It might be at 2:30 in the morning though.
And if you, for some reason, don't feel comfortable talking to Pete directly, feel free to DM us. We can put you in touch with Pete.
Right. If you don't want to be public about it, we can privately connect you. And the one thing Jamie always likes to ask, and I want to ask you, is we have something that we talk about often. It's called our brand crush. And it basically is a brand or a business or something that just really turns us on a little bit. Like we think we're doing an amazing job, or we can't live without it. And of course, Jamie and I are very vocal about everything that we think is amazing. Is there anything this year or locally in Waco or any place that you're just in love with and that your life would not be, you know, shiny or as sunshiny without, especially after the last several difficult months, like a small business that you want to spread some light to? We tag them, we share them. It's just like positive energy.
I mean, I don't have the best answer for this, because honestly, like I love podcasts, and I love, you know, this is crazy, but I love Howard Stern, and it's not like he needs any help. But for me, I mean, I grew up listening to him. He's kind of evolved. I feel like I've evolved as a man. It's a piece of the Northeast wherever I am. He's one of my heroes, and it's, you know, and I know he's not the greatest guy, whatever. I mean, like, he admits that. I mean, he actually is, you know, a very full person, and he's evolved a ton. But that show, and that's always been there for me. And it's weird, but I love it. And that is like, that's important to me. I know it sounds nuts, but yeah.
I think that's valid. And are you finding your way to other types of Southern fried chicken now? Like, have you varied
brisket? I love brisket.
Okay.
You know, here's one thing I love. There's a place called, here you go. I got one for you. A place called Lolita's here. They have the greatest breakfast tacos in the world. And these things really make me happy. It's local, and it's right here in Waco. And I think it's the best breakfast taco I've ever had in my life. And the Tex-Mex you get around here is awesome. I mean, you know, dating somebody in Dallas, I go there a lot. And just like the restaurants and the food is unbelievable here. I can't believe how good it is. And I'm from the Northeast. I thought we had the best food ever.
All right, so we'll shout out Howard. Lolita's.
I mean, yeah, I know. It's like,
and even better, we'll shout out Lolita's. And you know, and we'll share with the world that you have a good taste for food after spending some time at Kentucky Fried. And you know, I think You really are something, Pete. It is very, you're really actually the same guy. You're really actually the same guy. You were just lost. Because everything you're saying about you, I saw. Everything you're saying about you, I saw. So, I give you a lot of credit for coming home to yourself.
I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot. And I shared something you shared with me with a buddy of mine. I said, this woman who I really look up to and like had a bond with, talked about, who I think a lot of, talked about how she saw me in college. And you were really nice about it. But you were like, looking back, when I found out you were an alcoholic, I was like, oh yeah, that does make a little bit of sense. And I was blocked off from people like you. And now I'm not.
But we didn't know, and that's the thing, I think if we're going to say anything to all of us collectively, we need to speak up, even if it's uncomfortable. Like in 1997 or 1998, 1999, I wouldn't have even had the language.
Yeah, no chance.
I wouldn't have even known what to say, say, by the way, this is more than it should be, but we all, you just know things, but we didn't have the tools. And I do think now
it's wild when I read Glennon's book, for example, because she talks about, mostly in her second book that I just read, actually it's her first book, but it's the second book I read. She was at Love Warrior, where she talks about her addiction in college that really sounds so similar to all of our college experiences. Like we all binge drank. We all were drinking from morning till night. We all were throwing up and doing it again the next day anyway. And it really is so fascinating to hear where that moment happened and that there's still, it is such a mental wellness thing because, there is something that just clicked in Pete that didn't click in the rest of us, and that's okay. And you can fix it. So I think that that's something that's so important to share with the audience. It's we all have been there. It's just,
whatever your thing is, right? You feel, the hardest part is to show somebody your true self. And then when you do, you're free, You're free.
Well, hard work pays off, as does this conversation. It was a huge
You guys, by the way, what you guys are doing is awesome.
Thank you.
I've had a blast. And I know what you've done before and what it's good stuff. And when I connected with Marissa, it felt really good, and this feels really good. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll do anything I can to move, this thing forward with you guys. Whatever you need from me, just let me know.
If I could hug you, I would. It would be big with 2 arms, and I'm really, really happy to have reconnected. Yeah. And I send love to all the boys. We all had a special time when I would go home at 11:30, but you managed to stay out a little bit later than me.
Yeah.
We threw back. We all can hear the songs off Dave Matthews and have the same memories.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's the reason why we all are the way we are. So I'm thankful for you spending your afternoon or your evening, or actually it's bedtime or whatever it is for you right now. And we will catch up soon. It was nice to see your face, and I send you so much love. I'm so inspired by you, Pete. Good for you.
Thank you, guys. Right back at you. Marissa, Jamie, thank you guys so much for having me. Christian, take care, buddy. He's the producer. He's not there.
Have a good one. Bye, Pete.
First Sound. Thank you to Taja Collection, our sponsor. Thank you, Pete. Thank you to Choice Associates, our mothership. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks to the Richmond Spiders.
Go Richmond.
Wouldn't be here without you. Every day that we lead with light as the Dreamcatchers is made possible by our parent company, Partners in Crime, Choice Fashion and Media, division of Choice Associates, where we've been putting people to work since 1974.
So if you're looking for work or you're looking for people to work for you, check us out, www.choicepersonelinc.com.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast. bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros, Foes, Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Welcome to One Star Rewind, a new podcast about those dreaded one-star reviews that every business owner hates to receive, but yet every customer loves to read. During this podcast, we will peel back that one-star review to better understand how it happened, when it happened, and what the business owner is doing after receiving that one-star review. This podcast will be about love, hate, and laughter. On One Star Rewind, we will meet with real business owners who will tell their stories and how they do rely on reviews for their business. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or download us at roguemedianetwork.com. Please subscribe, but only rate and review for not a one-star review. Join us each time for a new review and a new story.